Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I hope everyone is well today, and welcome to the officially it's the 5th week of urban management. However, we will be discussing the topics that we should have been discussing on the 4th week because of last week's public holiday. So therefore, this week we should have 2 presentations, one on urban infrastructure management and the other on urban housing issues. I leave it up to you, whoever wants to go first. Just for those of you who just joined in, don't forget to scan the QR code. I will be displaying the code again near the end of our session. Are the presenters here and ready? Are the presenters here and ready? Who wants to go first?
I think I want to go first, sir.
Awesome. Great. Well, then I've stopped sharing, so I will hand the screen and the time over to you. Thank you.
Can you hear my voice?
I can hear your voice loud and clear, and I can see your screen.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Prananda and my friend. So, my name is Davin, and my team is Urban Infrastructure Management. And for my title is Improving the Quality of Supporting Infrastructure for Public Transportation in Surabaya. So, next is the public transportation in Surabaya will initially, wait a minute, sir. I'm so sorry. Okay, sorry for the interruption, sir. And so public transportation in Surabaya will initially use the tram. However, the tram project was cancelled and switched to using an alternative bus. One of the public transportation modes is a public favorite because of its punctuality. In addition, the price is also affordable and the rate is cheap. Apart from the buses, angkot are also an option in the city. And public transportation itself can play an important role in overcoming congestion in the city of Surabaya. The addition of roads cannot be a solution to overcome congestion if public transportation is not provided. And if transportation is not provided, resident can depend on the private transportation, and this will certainly have an impact on the amount of air pollution in the city of Surabaya. This is for the kind of the transportation. First, there are transportation by bus. The Surabaya bus is a means of transportation that has been operating since April 7, 2018. And in 2019, the bus fleet was added. So now there are 20 buses for public transportation in Surabaya. A total of 18 units are Surabaya bus, while the remaining 2 are double-decker bus. The Surabaya bus itself operates from 6 to 22 WIB. And there are Surabaya Transportation Service application. The Surabaya City Transportation Service has developed an application to facilitate transportation. The application, which is named Gobi Surabaya Bus, is one for all. This application can be used to find out various types of transportation, the position of the Surabaya bus, the bus stop that we are currently occupying, information about bottle exchange, tourist attraction, and SME center. And there are another transportation by angkot. Another public transportation is angkot. Angkot in Surabaya provides 57 routes. This transportation itself has reached the eastern, central, and southern parts of the city. And we can see in the right side is the map of the angkot routes in the Surabaya. And for the supporting infrastructure that I'm talking about here is infrastructure that can help people use existing public transportation. Example of this supporting infrastructure includes sidewalks that are used to access public transportation and bus stops as place to wait for the public. And this is the fact that Surabaya itself, according to INRIX through their research result, namely the Global Traffic Scorecard, Surabaya is ranked first in the most congested city in Indonesia, and we can see based on IQ Air that the quality of Surabaya as whole is moderate, but the quality per day in Surabaya is from moderate to unhealthy. And for the identification of issues, in identifying existing issues or problems, it is done by distributing questionnaires to Surabaya residents through existing social media with the question, is there any evaluation or input for infrastructure in Surabaya? Actually, the questionnaire that I use is a questionnaire that was distributed by the Instagram account named TF Surabaya on 27 February, asking about evaluation and input for the mayor of Surabaya. And this is the result in the right side. I only picked the one that related to the infrastructure, and it can be seen from the answer obtained. The people of Surabaya still have several complaints about public transportation in Surabaya, such as the quality of the transportation itself, the lack of integration between public transportation, the number of sidewalks that still do not meet, and then the roads are pothole and bumpy, and bus stops that not up to standard. And that's it for me. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you for that presentation on urban infrastructure or urban transport infrastructure. Sorry, supporting infrastructure for urban transport. Now, you defined supporting infrastructure for public transports are the kind of facilities that help people access public transport, such as sidewalks leading to bus stops and what other things, I have to give you I have to give you one note or one particular input on how you identified the issue. You said that you used a questionnaire that was distributed through the official Instagram account of the Surabaya Transport or Public Transport Forum, whatever that was. I didn't really catch it, but you identified the issues from the results of someone else's survey. So it's not that you formulated the questionnaire yourself and then distributed the questionnaire through your own personal network. That is fine, but it's fine for you and for everyone else to draw conclusions from other people's investigation, but it is not okay to claim their work as your own. For example, I distributed a questionnaire, but I think I asked you, how did you formulate the questionnaire and so on? How many questions were there? How many respondents did you recruit, and so on? So, but nothing in your presentation indicates that. So my suggestion is that if you want to continue to use the survey results as the basis for your investigation, yeah, you can sort of do that, but please cite the sources appropriately. Another way of identifying issues related to any of the themes in the subject would be to conduct a systematic literature review, or SLR, where you gather literatures and references from literature or references on a particular subject, on a particular theme, and then you review them systematically. How to conduct a systematic literature review. If you're unfamiliar with it, I can provide you with the references in our classroom. What is a systematic literature review? How to do a systematic literature review? A brief introduction of it, and just to get you all going. If you decide to use systematic literature review as a way of identifying the issue. Now, I know that if this particular or if the problem of transportation is not the problem with public transportation is not solved ASAP, as soon as possible, then we would see a gradual decrease in our in the air quality, in the overall air quality. You mentioned that right now our air quality or air pollution levels are at moderate in the best of days, and then it drops down to unhealthy in worse days, so to say. A recent study, well, it's not that recent, it's 2017, it was published in 2017, that study that was conducted by your senior peer. He's an alumni now. By your senior peer, found that in the eastern part of Surabaya, he didn't investigate air quality. He investigated urban heat islands. So in the eastern part of Surabaya, over the course of 15 odd years, the average temperature has risen almost 7 degrees Celsius. So over 15 years, a 7 degree Celsius increase is quite significant. He looked at it from a Landsat using a Landsat technique. So it's more dealing with so the variables were more land coverage and how much greenery were there and so on and so forth. But if you combine that urban heat island phenomenon with the air quality issue that is caused by the over reliance of private motorized transport, then I think you know that one of the major contributors to the urban heat island issue or the urban heat island phenomenon is, in fact, it comes from transportation or urban transportation. Now, my teacher, my professor at Tongji University, Shanghai, once told me that there is no such thing as too early to develop public transport. No such thing as too early. Before you know it, it's too late, he said. And it's true. Now, at the beginning, you mentioned that Surabaya wanted to develop, or the city government wanted to develop a tram network, although the effectiveness and the cost-benefit ratio and efficiency of tram networks are questionable at best. And they decided to scrap or to eliminate that altogether. I know we have two major bus lines at the moment that serves the north-south axis and a east-west axis connecting the easternmost point of Surabaya to the westernmost and the northernmost to the southernmost point. But even though we have these lovely buses that are operating throughout the city, their travel time can be a bit. The travel time, you can't really say that it's efficient. I think during peak hours, to get from the east to the north, from the east to the west, it'll take you about 3-4 hours. So because of the stops that it has to make along the way, and plus the congestion as well. So not quite the efficient mode of transport, but it's getting there. They got the idea that the good thing is that the government already has an idea that public transport is the way to go, or mass rapid transit is the way to go. I like that I did give you a feedback on providing the maps for the angkot, for the local mini buses that serve the city. Thank you very much for digging into the archives and retrieving those maps. I wish that you would have made it a bit bigger so that we can all see the maps, because I think, I don't know, about 10 years ago when I did this, when I assisted the World Bank in calculating the urban energy urban energy expenditure in Surabaya, we didn't have those maps. And the minibuses or the microbuses are, I think 10 years ago, there were more of these microbuses operating than they do now. Unfortunately, I don't think these minibuses get an update or an upgrade regularly. I think they've been that way since, oh God, I don't know, since 20, 30 years ago. So that's unfortunate. Yeah. Other than those points, overall, structure-wise, for the presentation and for the essay or for the manuscript, I would suggest that you provide a background information. First of all, highlighting what urban transportation is, what public transportation means to fast-growing cities such as Jakarta, Surabaya, maybe even from. Sorry, I keep hearing feedback, so I'm going to mute you for a bit. So. From big cities in Indonesia and perhaps other cities in Southeast Asia, let's say Bangkok. I know Bangkok has a pretty well developed public transport infrastructure. So what does it mean for big cities or for metropolitan cities? How do public transport contribute to moving goods and services throughout the city? Some forms of public transport work better than others. I know in some cities, even if they have mass rapid transit systems in place, they still can't get rid of congestion. I'm thinking of Beijing. Throughout the few months that I lived there, I don't think throughout the few months that I lived there, the subways were good. But the bus system was rather terrible because people keep driving on the bus lanes. Doesn't that sound familiar for you guys living in Jakarta? People keep driving on the bus lanes, and so the bus lanes get congested as well. So subway is the way to go. The metro is the way to go if you were to live and conduct your daily activities in Beijing. Same with Shanghai, despite having a massive mass rapid transit system in place, a really good metro system. But during rush hour, the metro systems are packed, the buses are packed, and the streets, well, don't ask, don't tell. It just doesn't move. So sometimes these sort of situations then can lead us to ask ourselves, so do public transport really work? Do public transport systems really work? Because well, if you reflect on big cities such as Beijing, Shanghai, then it seems as though they don't really help at all, or maybe it's just due to the sheer volume of people. So those are the questions that you should ponder in your introduction part before you come to talk about Surabaya. And when you talk about Surabaya, you can give a context. You can provide a context to the readers. How is public transport in Surabaya? So historically, what are there? We used to have trams. Now we got rid of trams, and now we're trying to bring the trams back. And now we're scrapping those plans. We're going with buses instead. What about the history of buses in Surabaya? We used to have double-decker buses in Surabaya, but made by British Leyland. But those buses keep catching fire. They keep catching fire and just burn back in the 80s, so they scrapped that as well. And then we have angkot or bemo. What we call them bemo here, angkots, mini buses or microbuses. But I don't really know how much their services overlap, whether one or more lines actually overlap. I don't know how much they overlap. Plus, the way these microbuses are managed, contribute or influence the level of service quality that they give to their passengers. Because the drivers are usually they have a minimum quota to fill, or in our language, sistem setoran. They have a minimum quota, a daily quota to fulfill, and so sometimes if they don't feel that they're going to get it, or maybe if they feel like, okay, I fulfilled my daily quota, I don't have to work anymore. What they do is if they don't have that many passengers, they will dump you in the middle of the road and they'll leave. That has happened to me several times on several occasions. And mind you, those were the days where we don't have mobile phones. So they just said, "Look, kid, I've got better things to do. So I'm gonna drop the three of you. I'm gonna drop the three of you off here, and you can catch the next one." And we don't even know when the next microbus is gonna come. And it was late in the afternoon. It was nearing dark. And so the way it is managed also influences that level of service quality thing. And I think with the new buses where the drivers receive steady salary, their level of service has gone up significantly. I don't know how the microbuses or the bemos or the angkots are managed to this day. If they still follow the daily quota system, then I think that's not ideal. So provide a public transport context for Surabaya, and then you can also review the plans for future development, and then come down to the supporting infrastructure for public transport issue. What's going on with the supporting infrastructure? How are the sidewalks? How are the bus stops? I know we have several park and ride facilities along Khair Muhammad. I think I see a few park and ride facilities there. How are those park and ride facilities? What other supporting infrastructure? What about signage? Are there adequate signage to let people know where the bus stops are, and so on and so on? So, and then when you describe the way you identify the issue, again choose. You can review other people's work, but if you choose to use other people's work or other people's results to identify your issues, then I would suggest the systematic literature review approach, or you can use or you can conduct a comparative analysis of supporting infrastructure for public transport in big cities across Indonesia, to identify what are the common issues. Do these issues also exist in Surabaya, or they exclusively occur in other places instead? So that is my feedback for your manuscript. Once again, thank you very much. And I would now like to give the opportunity to the other members of our class, the other class participants, to give their feedback or their thoughts, or perhaps deliver a question or two around public transport management. Not just in Surabaya, perhaps we can discuss public transport management in other places as well.
Thank you so much for the feedback, sir.
No worries. No, no comments or questions whatsoever from the other participants. All right then. If no one else has any, if there are no further questions or comments, then I'd like you to close or end your presentation, and I would like to invite the next presenter.
So, good afternoon, Mr. Fernanda and friends. I would like to present my presentation about the squatter area in Kampung 1001 Malam, Surabaya. So, first we have to distinguish between slum and the squatter. Slum is the area where people with land ownership live in poor environmental and socio-economic condition. But the squatter area, defined as a low residential area which has developed without legal right. So the difference between slum and squatter is the right or the land ownership. And why do slum and squatter settlement manifest in cities across the world? There are some reasons. The first is the urbanization, poor housing planning, informal economy, labor work, politics, colonialism and segregation, poverty, and poor infrastructure, social exclusion, and economic stagnation. So, what is the impact of the slum? And for the social itself, slum and squatter area remain isolated from other urban communities and exhibited pathological social symptoms such as drug abuse, alcoholism, crime, vandalism, and other deviant behavior. And for the environmental, slum houses are crammed in a little space. They are often prone to dangerous hazards like floods, waterlogging, fire, and etc. And the extent of fire hazard is increased because the high population density. And slums have no particularly drainage, and most of the slums are located near drains that contain filthy stagnant water. And this is the reason why there are slum or squatter area in Indonesia. Basically, there are two reasons. The first is the uneven development and the industrialization, and the program that been implemented such as pembangunan nasional semesta berencana dan pembangunan 5 tahun or pelita has disadvantages. First, because the process of modernization trigger differences in progress between rural and urban areas, so that the village doesn't have a potential to become a place to meet the economic needs of its people. And this program also focus on industrialization, and at that time most areas in Indonesia were agricultural and only a few regions or cities has industries, so it can lead into urbanization, and it happened in Indonesia also, in Surabaya. So my location is in Kampung 1001 Malam, located in Dupak, Kembangan, Surabaya, East Java, in Indonesia. And Kampung 1001 Malam, located near Dupak Gresik Toll Road and next to the Bosem Mor Kembangan, and also it has a small river. And the land ownership it's belong to PT Jasa Marga. And with the poor and unhealthy condition, the village is inhabited with 180 households, and the majority residents is the immigrant. And for the location condition, for the geography, Kampung 1001 Malam is located in Dupak Sub-District, Kembangan District, and Surabaya City. And this village is located northern part of Surabaya and adjacent to the Teluk Lamong. This village also close to one of the Bosem in Surabaya. And for the culture condition, the majority of the resident is the immigrant, and the immigrants come from several regions, especially in East Java, such as Madura, Bojonegoro, Lamongan, Madiun, and others. And for the economic condition in this area are considered below the average income of the community, and the majority of the workers as scavengers, beggars, busker, and construction workers, pedicab drivers, and unskilled laborers. And for the problem, because Kampung 1001 Malam was originally an area under the Dupak Toll Road, which inhabited because it was intended for the settlement. This area also used as an escape for bajing lompat, and namely thief who steal cargo. And the urbanized group who came to Surabaya didn't have the strong capital or skill to face the globalization, especially those who don't have a certain skill. As a result, they were marginalized, and this marginalized group is then unable to access proper housing due to the very minimal income. And regarding the educational, the school participation rate is very low because the majority have dropped out of school at the elementary school level. And you can see from the data, the student who drop out from the primary school is 9, and in junior high school is 18, and uneducated is 122. And this is also has an impact to Surabaya because this has an impact on quality of human resources. It will trigger also in unemployment, crime, poverty, and juvenile delinquency. And for the economic problems, average worker as a busker and scavenger or construction workers. For the income, according to Koalisi Perempuan.or.id, scavenging work can generate around 900,000 per month. Meanwhile, based on the interview from Tito, is one of the residents who work as a construction worker. His income reached 750,000 per month. Meanwhile, when compared to Surabaya residency minimum wage, or in 2017, regular concerned wage is the 3 million per month. And in this pandemic, it also has impact on their residents. According to Bejo, on average resident here we were scavenger before pandemic, salary 800 rupiah per month, but after the pandemic, it decreased by 70%. It only reached 200 per month. And this is the environment problem. This village has a very high population density. With an area of 5 hectares, the village has population 180 household. For example, for the house with 24 meters square can be filled by several households with family members approximately 10 people. And every house doesn't have a bathroom, and the shape of the house doesn't meet the requirement because the majority of building use the same permanent material such as triplex, wood, and other. And about the sanitation, it's also very good because it is directly adjacent to the river, which is very dirty and become the place for garbage disposal and the number of toilet facilities. And for the clean water, residents of this village use 4 wells provided by a particular party, and several others receive the irrigation every 1 hour from the other village, which is Bangunrejo. And this is the existing program. So far, there is no program regarding the environmental improvement, but the program that have been implemented is only the community development. The first is the establishment of the Komunitas Selam Pita, which founded in 2007, and other is the Rumah Pintar Notari. And both of them develop the community based on UMKM. And this is the references. And I think that's all from me.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, this time I'd like to give the opportunity to the others if they have any comments or questions regarding the topic that has been presented. Yep.
Thank you, sir, for the opportunity. I would like to ask to Yeager, what do you know do you have any idea why PT Jasa Marga, which is the owner of the land, still hasn't done anything about this settlement?
That's a very good question. I wonder why PT Jasa Marga diam saja. Why do they let this settlement continue to exist? If you please.
Basically, I don't know the reason why, but if I'm not mistaken, what I read, because the Samaga think that it is not their obligation, so the Samaga just let it be.
And perhaps another reason, another plausible reason would be that Jasa Marga views the land on which the settlement exists as a low value, or the land that they occupy is a low, it has a low economic significance or value to Jasa Marga, so they thought, meh, we'll just let that one slide. That's another possibility. I think the slums phenomenon is something that I think it's a never-ending issue. It's a never-ending issue in both the global north and the global south. I'll give you an example. In Brisbane, along the Brisbane River, if you take a ride, if you go on a bike ride on the Bicentennial Bikeway, and at a certain point where the bikeway meets an elevated motorway, underneath the elevated motorway, you will find squatter settlements. Most of the squatter settlements inhabitants are, yes, of course, they're homeless, but what is more striking is that they are predominantly indigenous people. So that's along the motorway, along the river, and then in some other places as well, beneath the bridges, usually under bridges, which is kind of which to me I think is well, I wouldn't say that I'm shocked. I'm not that surprised, especially considering that the people who are homeless are actually indigenous people. These are usually from marginalized societies. They through some sort of systemic racism, they ended up being in the streets. So either they occupy spaces such as under the bridge, or they would sometimes gather around certain park benches. Over the years I was there, I think the number of these squatter settlements have been reduced. I know the Department of the Department of Social Work and Social Affairs regularly visit these people. They regularly clean up the area, so to say. But then again, it's those areas near or in the city center that they clean up. There was one homeless person near where I live, not an indigenous person, but he spends his days in this small I wouldn't say boulevard. It was just a small patch of greenery, near in my suburb, or in the suburb that I live in, not in my suburb, in the suburb that I lived in, surrounded by plastic bottles and makeshift. And he lives under a makeshift tent, so homeless. And again, the social services would come every now and then, but they never evicted that person. But on the other hand, the indigenous squatters, they get raided regularly. So again, through some sort of systemic racism, I would say. But anyways, again, so even in the more developed nations, slum squatter settlements are still major issues. Access to housing is getting more and more difficult. So you can see, if you have a look at housing backlog numbers from time to time, the government does their best to provide housing or to provide access to housing, yet the backlog rates still still increases. So the number of houses that we provide doesn't even come near the number of housing backlog, and it's a sad truth. But in the case of these settlements, where in the case of these slum and squatter settlements, where most of the inhabitants are migrants, presumably low-skilled migrants, presumably as well they've been there for for generations. So at least 1 or 2 generations have lived in that particular settlement, and so it gets even more difficult to deal with. Now, there are external and internal factors that drive slum. Let's just call them illegal settlements, that drive illegal settlements, because slums can be legal settlements. But this one in particular is illegal, so let's just call them illegal settlements. So there are external and internal factors that drive the growth of illegal settlements. External factors such as housing access, loans to buy a house, so housing mortgage mechanisms and affordable housing. Those are the sort of factors, or the sort of factors that the government, city governments, central government can deal with, can help with. But internal factors such as limited technical capacity, limited capital, limited and other internal factors. Internal factors, or the factors that come from the migrants themselves, is something that is a bit more difficult to deal with. We can provide them with education, training, and other means or other facilities to empower them, so that they can access opportunities that the city has to offer. For example, they come, perhaps some migrants come to the city with skills. They are skilled, but they do not have the proper documentation to prove that they have those skills. For example, certification. But they can't get certified because certification can be expensive. So what can we do? Well, through, I don't know, public-private partnerships perhaps, we can provide free certification, we can provide free training, free certification for such and such skill sets. And so once they receive certification, they can then access whatever opportunity is there that the city has to offer. So anything that empowers them through either education. I think there was a slide that mentioned small to medium enterprises, SMEs, that produce I don't know, spinach crackers. I think it was crackers and yes, thank you, crackers and embroidery. So handicrafts, these sort of things. If we upscale them, then we can empower them. Even more, so that they can access wider opportunities and such. So those are the ways we can deal with internal factors of these migrants. Other ways of helping them access affordable housing, access suitable housing, rumah layak huni, any other mechanisms to help them access proper housing would be through public-private partnerships. However, public-private partnerships have been there is a study that indicated that public-private partnerships are unjust. They said they're unfair because a lot of public-private partnerships do not involve local actors, or even if they do involve local actors, their involvement is somewhat limited. So I guess the way to go about public-private partnerships is to ask whether local actors or local stakeholders are involved. Who are these local stakeholders? Well, local residents, inhabitants of existing illegal settlements, whether they're involved, low-income groups, whether they're involved, and of course non-governmental organizations or NGOs and or LSM. How are they involved? If the answer to all of this is yes, 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 and yes, then you can ask further, how are they involved? What is the degree of their involvement? Are they involved in this PPP as mere observers, or are they doing more? Are they involved in deeper? If you remember the different levels of community engagement in community development, that's the sort of thing that I'm talking about, the ladder of participation. That's what it is. So which rung of the ladder are they on? How much are they involved in this? How deep are they involved in this? So that's one way of making sure that PPPs are just. An earlier discussion on slum and squatter settlements suggested that why can't we? Are there any other solutions to housing backlogs and slum and squatter settlements, or illegal settlements? Other than housing provision. So it's not just a matter of providing them with houses and providing them with access to housing. Are there any other mechanisms? And one of the discussants hinted on family planning program, Keluarga Berencana, to sort of slow down the population growth rate. And if you think about that, then perhaps you can also You can compare. You can compare. You can compare population data from an illegal settlement. You can see their population trends. Are they relatively stagnant, or are they going up? If they're going up, then perhaps family planning program would help. At least to keep the population under control until they can get themselves out of that situation and into a more decent and suitable housing. But it is an unfortunate matter that people end up living in such arrangements. Another thing that I forgot to mention. One of the most commonly mentioned, or one of the most commonly cited factors that hinder or that limit the access of illegal settlement dwellers to housing opportunities or any other opportunities for that matter is their lack of documentation. No papers to they don't have any papers or documentation to prove their legal status. Tidak punya KTP. They don't have a national ID perhaps, and they don't have any other documentations. I mentioned certification, so perhaps no primary school or high school diplomas, and so on. So these lack of papers, these lack of documentation also limit their capability of accessing resources such as loans, housing loans, and other forms of loans, not just housing. So how can we then provide access to people with no documentation? Well, I have mentioned in one of my classes, I think in urban design, that the face of our cities is full of what is known as dualism. There was always a constant struggle between the formal and the informal spaces, or the formal and the informal forces within a city. So perhaps if we can't provide them with formal access, then we should look into the informal mechanisms to provide them access. Take a look at Grameen Bank. I think it's in Pakistan, that provides loans for low-income families, low-income households without documentation. So if they can do it, why can't we? So these informal mechanisms, but however, these informal mechanisms must not be let, you shouldn't let them go about and create their own programs and such. But these informal mechanisms should be overseen by the formal entities. For example, if you're providing informal loans to low-income families, then that informal mechanism should be supervised, not controlled, just supervised by the financial authorities, OJK, for example. Formal entities supervising informal mechanisms does not make these informal mechanisms formal. They're just supervising, making sure that the mechanism is going is going the way it's supposed to. So perhaps we need to think. Every now and then. We need to think outside the formal realm and look into the informal realm to help us, or not help us, but to help these people, living in illegal settlements, people living in uncertainty, in providing them access to empowerment and to opportunities to help themselves out of such situations. And then after that, when all else fails, if that still doesn't work, then we'll still have to look at other mechanisms that allow for more sustainable, resilient, and inclusive outcomes. Okay, great. Does anyone else have any further comments, or perhaps you would like to counter my formal and informal argument then, which I am more than happy to receive. Yes, please.
Hello, sir. Thank you so much for the great insights. Maybe this sounds cliche, but I would like to ask, you said earlier that one way to overcome this kind of backlog is through the public-private partnership. And my question is, what kind of benefit that the private could get through this kind of partnership? Since, like, from what I've known, the private sectors mostly would like to get the biggest profit that they could get. So yeah, that's my question.
That is a very valid question. Thank you very much. So, what's in it for the private party? What's in it for the developers? We have all heard of incentive and disincentive mechanisms in planning, in governance, and one way that the private party can benefit from public-private partnership schemes is through tax reduction. So any reduction in tax would be good. Another way they can benefit is they can plaster their names. It's advertising. It's part of an advertising campaign for them. They can plaster their names. This real estate group is involved in so-and-so community development. We're doing good. Now, a lot of people, some people would say that such an attempt is akin to greenwashing, and oh, that's just a publicity stunt. Well, in a way, it is. If I had a real estate, if I own a real estate development, I would more than happy to get myself involved just for the tax relief, and then of course to be able to put my company's name on the I don't know if they have billboards or they have banners, they have reports and other documents, have my company name and logo there. That'd be good. People are aware of my company. That's advertising. That's one. That's another way of them benefiting, and so that would increase my company's reputation. And so when people buy a house from my company, they would think, oh, it's a reputable and socially responsible company. Perhaps if the customer is socially aware, it's a socially responsible company. We would be more than happy to buy a house from you, so that you can continue to provide opportunities for those who are less fortunate, perhaps. But it's true, and in the end, all these combine to greater profits, of course. I'm sure that any private parties involved in PPP schemes, they would only allocate a certain portion of their resources for the PPP scheme, whilst still maintaining a larger, perhaps a more significant amount for their main operations. So, well, I think that's the only way. That's the only way I can imagine a PPP scheme would benefit the private party. So through tax relief and other intangible forms of advertising, perhaps, to increase their reputation. And so on one hand, they get tax relief, and on the other hand, the government then is taken one or two steps closer to their target of providing affordable housing for lower income groups. And then, of course, the lower income groups they benefit from such programs because they can now access affordable and decent and suitable housing, healthy housing, or better housing. But yeah, that's a very good question, and to be honest, it's something that I rarely ponder about. What do they get out of this? I just thought, okay, they're a big group. I think they're doing this for charity, but I think it's a bit more than just charity. It's a very calculated and strategic, move from these large enterprises. So thank you very much for that question.
Thank you for the explanation, sir. It's really interesting.
You're welcome. You are more than welcome to dig a bit deeper, and just to see whether I'm right or wrong. I'm more than happy for you to prove me wrong. For example, maybe, I don't know, next week you can pick up the discussion again and say, you know what you said yesterday about tax revenue, about tax reliefs, nonsense. Maybe you found a reference that indicates that private parties use PPP mechanisms in other fashions. So yeah, more than happy to continue the discussion. Any other comments? a little additional note on housing and home ownership. When we talk about housing backlog, indicates that there are houses, whether they are rental properties or properties that are for sale, in the market that are inaccessible to people. So people can't access that. People can't access either the rental properties or the purchase to own properties. Now, this can indicate a lot of things. It could indicate that we have limited amounts of land. That's why we can't continue to build housing. But yeah, I don't think we're really using that much in quote unquote. I think there's still an abundance of land. It's just that we have to manage it in a way that we don't run out of it soon. But it can also mean that market forces are controlling most of the development in a city. I'm not saying it's a good or a bad thing, but if you let market forces continue to control urban development, then you will have a lot of negative externalities. Negative externalities such as what? Well, the housing backlog is one externality, and the housing backlog also indicates inequality, because market forces, as Putri said, the private sector is only cares for profit. Well, market forces are driven by profit, and so housing prices will continue to rise. And it will continue to become unattainable by even the middle upper class. So it will continue to rise, and the gap, the inequality, social economic inequality will continue to become more and more. It'll become starker. So market forces and other negative externalities, because the market will look for potentially profitable land. They can drive uncontrolled urbanization, or they can cause uncontrollable spatial patterns, uncontrollable spatial development patterns, and which leads to urban sprawl and so on. And then since the neighboring city is also doing that, then it will lead to urban agglomeration and such. So they drive market forces drive this sort of growth, and if not done properly, then it will take years, maybe even decades or millennia, to fix whatever those negative externalities may be. Other negative externalities other than equality would be pollution, congestion, and other infrastructure related issues. So once these spatial developments manifest, then we have to provide adequate public transportation, for example. So it all comes, it all stems. A lot of these stem from housing and the way market forces control housing development. So what's the government's role in this? Well, the government's role is to control, to control the market forces, so that they don't control the market forces, so that they don't not produce, so that they don't induce as much negative externalities as they would. How do they control it? They control it through, governments can control it through land provision mechanisms, mekanisme penyediaan lahan. So, for example, a simple and oversimplified example would be, if a developer says that is prime land for development right there, just outside the city, the government can say, that's my land, you're not going to build on that, I'm going to tell you to build somewhere else. If this is a big if local authorities have that power, or have that power or the strength to do so, to control, and make sure that there are no uncontrollable developments, then I think we would have a much better much more sustainable spatial growth. Because no, you're not going to build there, that's my land, build somewhere else, I'll show you where. So with developing countries, with high population growth rates, such as Indonesia and other countries in Southeast Asia, the local government's role would be to provide land, of course, and control the land provision. Now, it's easier said than done. If all the land in this country belonged to the government, say for example like in Singapore or China, where the properties that we live in, the houses that we live in, well, we don't own the land, we rent the land, but we own the house. Then it would be easier for the government to control. But the form of our government is not like that, so it's a bit of a challenge. It is a bit of a challenge then to balance the power between local governments or provincial governments, central governments, whichever is involved or responsible for the land provision, land acquisition. It would be a bit more challenging for them, of course, because the government sort of quote unquote does not own the land. We have many different titles, ownership titles. We have hak milik, we have hak guna bangunan, we have hak kelola, hak sewa, and so on. So many forms. In a way, that's good. That provides options for the people. But on the other hand, it can be a bit challenging because, well, you're dealing with different forms of ownership. Once it is SHM, then there's not much the government can do about it, because it is within that person's rights to own and to do whatever they want with the land. So yeah, I think that's all that I can add to the discussion. Coming back to the presentation, I think you've done a pretty solid job there, but with regards to presenting results from other from existing studies, I would say that you shouldn't really say that or an interview with so and so indicated that. I would just suggest to mention who conducted the study, who conducted the interview, and then what are the results of the interview? For example, when you were talking about about their daily or monthly income of local residents in Seribu Satu Malam, you mentioned interview with this says that, interview with this says that. So I would just quote whoever did that interview and say that all initial interviews or interviews conducted by so and so person indicates that people in the illegal settlement receive as much or as little as so and so 100,000 per month compared to the local compared to the regional minimum wage of so and so million, for example. Yeah, that is all I can add. That is all I can add to this presentation. Just a reminder that the manuscripts should be submitted to Classroom 1 week after you've done your presentation. And between now and next week, if you'd like to consult your manuscript with me before you submit it, then you're more than welcome to do so. As a matter of fact, it is highly recommended that you do so. That is all I have. That is all I have for today. Does anybody have any additional questions or comments?
Sorry, sir. I haven't present my presentation last week, so do I have to present it now or?
Well, I think. Oh, right. I didn't mention that to you, but I did mention it in the class recording a couple of weeks ago. That since we have that one, you can present in the you can present at the same time as I think it was it disaster management or smart city. So you can present because there is that one there is one theme that stands out on its own because we have 11 themes. You can present with the final theme, or if you are ready to present now, then I think you can present your topic now if you'd like. How are you recovering from the coronavirus?
I am now already recovered, but for the presentation, I can do it now. I don't mind, but I would like to revise my work. So can I present it later with the urban disaster?
That's okay. That's okay. I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad to hear that you've made a full recovery. And yes, you are more than welcome to present with the urban disaster management or with the disaster management theme. In the meantime, you can also consult with me you can also consult your manuscript and or presentation with me. So yeah.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Okay. Well, anything else? Okay then. If there are no additional comments or questions, then I'd like to thank the presenters for sharing their findings with us today, and thank you as well for the discussion, which was really interesting. Again, I'm more than welcome if you would like to counter my arguments, and the opinions that I've delivered throughout the sessions. I'd be more than happy to continue this discussion or any other discussion related to urban management and or your themes. Once again, thank you very much for joining me today. I wish you all well, take good care of yourselves, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Have a great afternoon. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.